Can't decide and torn between a romantic, comedy, action, or an indie film to watch for the weekend? Well. Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast is your ultimate guide to the latest movies. Join us as we dissect the latest on the blockbusters. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast.
GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Rich McDonough, and right now I should be coming to you towards the end of April. And slowly, inch by inch, we are working our way into the blockbuster segment of the calendar. Things got kicked off earlier this month with the release of Godzilla vs. Kong, and our first feature film we'll be talking about continues with the blockbuster theme, as we will be discussing the Mortal Kombat reboot. I personally was a bit too young for the Mortal Kombat video game. I vaguely remember the Mortal Kombat film, and I'm not entirely sure what the target audience for this reboot really is, but it seems like it'll be a lot of fun to talk about. So that is where we will be starting today. After that, I wanted to talk about the new science fiction thriller that is coming out, Stowaway, which stars Daniel Day Kim and Anna Kendrick. This film is about a space mission to Mars, which, as you can probably guess from the title, has an unplanned stowaway joining the crew. So that will be interesting to talk about that Netflix original. And then I will be taking a look at the new Ed Helms film, Together, which has the entertaining premise of Helms' character of Matt hiring a surrogate to carry a child for him, but as it turns out, the two end up developing feelings for each other and have to balance their growing intimate feelings for each other with the professional agreement they have struck between the two of them. So that should be a fun film to dissect, and be sure to stick around until the end of the show, because this episode should be coming to you just before the Oscars, which are scheduled to take place Sunday, April 25th. And to coincide with the film industry's biggest night, I will be going through category by category and making my picks for who I think is going to take home the hardware. So be sure to stick around, because we have all that and more coming up on the GSMC Movie Podcast. But in this segment, we are going to be talking about the new blockbuster, or hopeful blockbuster, Mortal Kombat. But before we get into that film, we're going to start this show, as we do every show, by talking about a film from the book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. And this week's installment is the 1976 classic, All the President's Men. Given all the political turmoil we experience on seemingly a daily basis in this country now, it could be a fun exercise for some of you to revisit a movie that details an event that kind of started us on the pathway to polarization. All the President's Men, of course, covers the events surrounding Woodward and Bernstein uncovering the illegal efforts of the Republicans to get Richard Nixon reelected, including the now infamous break-in at the Watergate Hotel, where people were actually hired by Richard Nixon to break into the headquarters of the Democratic National Convention. And while this is remembered as one of the biggest black eyes on American politics, it really should be remembered as just a stupid move in general. The rationale for hiring people to break into the Watergate Hotel was in order to leave no stone unturned, because Nixon was obsessed with being reelected in '72. The real stupidity of this move comes from the fact that it was overkill, and Nixon was going to win by a landslide. In the 1972 election, he carried every single state aside from Massachusetts, and the electoral votes allotted to D.C. So Watergate really shouldn't just be known as one of the biggest political scandals in American history. It should be really remembered as one of the biggest political bonehead moves ever committed. The actions were completely unnecessary, and the risk of gathering whatever information they were able to gather was clearly not worth it. So, after that, everyone who paid attention in middle school history knows that Nixon was forced to resign, Gerald Ford became president without a single vote being cast in his name, and the suffix of gate became synonymous with a scandal. And this film, All the President's Men, is a dramatization of those events. But in terms of a piece of cinema, it is really a lot more than that because it is pretty difficult, as one can imagine, to build a suspenseful thriller around events that everyone already knows about. And the conclusion of the narrative is already common knowledge. But nonetheless, the film is able to keep things interesting and keep the audience guessing throughout. Not only that, this film probably has one of the most parodied scenes in film history. Anytime you have seen characters meet in a garage where one character is shrouded in darkness, that is an homage to the scene in this film where the characters of Woodward and Bernstein, played by Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman, meet with their contact, Deep Throat, which was the code name given to the anonymous tipster that kept feeding them all this information and telling them to pursue the story about the corruption in the Republican Party. So, if any of you out there are a fan of political discord but are growing weary of the current climate and the incredibly volatile nature of our current political landscape, I suggest you take a look back at yesteryear with the film All the President's Men. Like I said, it stars Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. Furthermore, this film would go on to win 4 Academy Awards, including Best Art Direction, Best Sound, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Jason Robards would win an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. So, not only is the film All the President's Men a classic in terms of a story, but it is also a living example of questioning authority and challenging the establishment. The real-life Woodward and Bernstein were going after an incumbent president, thus shouldering all the implications that came with it. And ultimately, one of their rewards, aside from winning the Pulitzer, would be having a film made about that journey be released in the year of America's bicentennial. So while everyone around the country is being told to be flushed with national pride and celebrate the 200th birthday of the country, one of the year's most popular movies is telling the story of 2 journalists that went against the power and uncovered the biggest political scandal in modern times. So, to all those interested, this week's recommendation from the book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die is All the President's Men. But to shift gears entirely away from a film that is based on true events to a film that is complete and utter fantasy, which is inspired by a video game, that is the upcoming new release, Mortal Kombat. And as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, this is a reboot. There have been 2 Mortal Kombat adaptations, one released in 1995, and the sequel, Annihilation, released in 1997, and there was even a TV series in 2010. And again, Mortal Kombat was a bit before my time, though I have certainly heard of it due to its immense cult following and just how beloved it is by true fans of the game. The movies, on the other hand, I think are a completely different story because I really don't think there's a cult following for either of them, other than both entries being just another footnote in how terrible movies adapted from video games usually turn out to be. And now that I'm on that topic, I really can't think of a single video game movie or video game franchise that's been committed to the big screen that was any good. The Super Mario Brothers movie from the early 90s is the cheesiest thing you'll ever see. The Resident Evil films are merely mindless action flicks, which there's nothing wrong with, but there's not much there in terms of substance. The Tomb Raider movies exist and are popular solely so people can ogle Angelina Jolie's assets, is I guess the best way to describe that. I personally have never played World of Warcraft, but when you look at the animation in the game as opposed to the movie, and when the animation in the game is better than the adaptation, something is clearly wrong there. The Assassin's Creed movie flopped so hard that it had all the planned sequels canceled. Not even having an actor in the franchise the caliber of Michael Fassbender could have saved Assassin's Creed. And then we just get into the laughably bad films like Prince of Persia with Jake Gyllenhaal, where the guy with the whitest sounding name ever is supposed to be playing a Middle Eastern prince and has a magic dagger that helps him rewind time. And it really is a wonder why that movie was such a big box office flop. And I will say, it is one of the only films I have ever walked out on. So I have to thank my high school friend Maddie for saving me from subjecting myself to what, by all accounts, is a terrible movie. And Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time, is by no means unique when it comes to a video game adaptation. A general rule of thumb with those type of films is they kind of suck. But hopefully this iteration of Mortal Kombat can change that, and at the very least can just be a decent film. And to be fair to the upcoming Mortal Kombat, I don't think it really needs to have this incredible depth of a plot, because when you think about it, the people that are most likely going to go and see this film just want to see well choreographed fights and some great special effects, which, if the trailer is anything to go by, this film will certainly deliver on those fronts. And while Mortal Kombat is set in a reality where things are very supernatural, the filmmakers are at least attempting to make this plot somewhat believable by having the main character of Cole Young be an MMA fighter, so he's not entirely overmatched when he suddenly discovers his mystical abilities and is thrown into a long prophesized combat tournament, which I will say isn't the worst way to structure a film like this. It stays true to the video game in the sense there will be a bunch of head-to-head fights between these characters without it being just a bunch of random mindless fighting. So to all those listening out there that are a fan of the martial arts action thriller, Mortal Kombat is most likely going to deliver on that front, while additionally providing some nostalgia for long-standing fans of the franchise. The film is rated R due to the graphic violence that the film contains, so really the only audience members that can see the film are of the generation that can somewhat remember the video game, which just throws another log onto the fire, where if you are an intellectual property with even the slightest pre-sold audience and have a following above a certain size, you are going to get a feature film. Or in the case of Mortal Kombat, have a film made, have a sequel to that film made, then take a 24-year hiatus and have another film made. But hopefully this iteration of Mortal Kombat performs better than its predecessors. It's already been released internationally, having hit theaters April 8th, and so far it's garnering pretty mixed reviews from critics, but audiences seem to enjoy the film. For all of you listening stateside, the film will be released Friday, April 23rd, and it will be getting a theatrical release, but it will also be available the same day to people subscribed to HBO Max. So whether you are itching to get back into a movie theater or you want to enjoy it from the comfort of your own home, you'll be able to view Mortal Kombat starting April 23rd. Once again, the film is rated R, so viewer discretion is advised. But regardless of the rating, I hope Mortal Kombat is a success. It has a first-time director, Simon McQuoid, at the helm, so it'll be interesting to see what he does in his directorial debut. And as far as the cast goes, it's not really full of household names. Louis Tan is in the lead role of Cole Young, and he's probably best known for his appearance in Deadpool 2. Jessica McNamee is in the film as well, and hopefully this doesn't turn out like her other big box office film, The Meg, even though it is well established on this podcast that I love that terrible movie. But in all honesty, their performances are going to pale in terms of importance when compared to Joe Taslim, who has the difficult task of bringing possibly the most beloved figure in the Mortal Kombat franchise to the big screen, as he will be portraying Sub-Zero. But in all fairness to him, he does bring a level of legitimacy to the role, as he was a member of the Indonesian judo team from the years 1997 to 2009. So it is a pretty safe bet that when it comes to Sub-Zero's fight scenes, they're gonna look legit. So hopefully him and his fellow cast members can do the source material justice and make this Mortal Kombat film an exception to the rule. Video game movies are destined to suck. But to recap one more time, Mortal Kombat will be released Friday, April 23rd, and will be available in theaters as well as on HBO Max. So if you're a fan of the old video game or just a fan of martial arts movies, check it out. Right now, however, we are going to be taking a break on the GSMC movie podcast, but be sure to stick around as we have a lot more to get into. Coming up on our next segment, I will be once again giving you the box office report, where I take a look at which films are slowly but surely performing well at the box office. Additionally, I will be taking a look at the new sci-fi thriller Stowaway, starring Daniel Day Kim and Anna Kendrick. And you are definitely going to want to stick around until the end of the show, as with this being award season and the ultimate award show on the horizon, I will be giving you my picks on who I think will be going home with those little golden men. And this year's Oscars will prove to be a very unique one. From when you consider Mank is nominated for a record-tying 14 Academy Awards, and for the first time in history, there are 2 women nominated for Best Director in the same year. And while, much like last year, there won't be anybody in attendance of the ceremony, but it should prove to be compelling to see what films are rewarded in a year where the film industry faced challenges they had never seen before. So stick around, we have all that and more coming up on the GSMC Movie Podcast.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. It keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Rich McDonough, and on my last segment, I just wrapped up talking about the new potential blockbuster, the Mortal Kombat reboot. It has been released internationally, but will be making its way to U.S. theaters starting Friday, April 23rd. And while I did spend a good amount of last segment bashing the idea of turning a video game into a film as a whole, because if we are being honest and looking at the many times studios have attempted this feat, the vast majority of those products turn out to be flaming piles of hot garbage. But hopefully the latest iteration of Mortal Kombat can be an exception to that rule, and even though it has slightly cheesy movie tropes in it, like the mysterious birthmark on the protagonist, the film definitely seems prepared to deliver on the incredible action sequences it's promised, and overall just appears to be a fun film. I should warn audiences that the film is rated R, but for all of you over the age of 17, or those of you who convince your parents to take you to the film, you can either see it in theaters starting April 23rd, or it will be available on HBO Max. So hopefully Mortal Kombat lives up to its blockbuster billing, and its performance can help the film industry return to form at the box office. But one film that doesn't have to worry about box office performance is the Netflix original Stowaway, which is making its debut on that platform April 22nd, which will be the film I am focusing on in this segment. The film features Daniel Day Kim as well as Anna Kendrick in leading roles, so I'm looking forward to talking about that film. But first, I'm going to once again do the box office report, because while the film industry is changing in ways where films like Stowaway are being put directly on platforms rather than getting theatrical releases, I still think the best metric for measuring what audiences respond to and what audiences are interested in are the box office returns, especially now with all the restrictions we have to face in the world. I think that there's a lot more that can be taken from audience members physically going to a location and paying to see a movie. Can tell you a lot more about what audiences are interested in rather than, let's say, a film like Stowaways reaching the top 10 on Netflix, which is a service people are subscribed to anyway. And I'm sure as streaming becomes more prevalent and there are more and more pieces of content that are made to go directly to a platform, there will have to be a new way to measure how successful a film release is. But for the time being, the best indicator I have is the box office returns. So let's take a look at what films performed the best the week of April 9th through the 15th. And during that week, it should be no big surprise who the undisputed king of the box office was, and that was Godzilla vs. Kong. The ultimate meeting of movie monsters raked in over $16.5 million last week, bringing its domestic total to almost $73 million. And I know that Godzilla vs. Kong is not only a major event on this year's film calendar, but just in terms of cinematic history, where it appeals to demographics of all ages. I take it as a very encouraging sign for the film industry in general that there is a movie out there that can gross an amount approaching $100 million. And when we factor in the worldwide box office, Godzilla vs. Kong has made approaching $400 million, which is pretty much double what the budget to make the film was. So even through a pandemic, it still holds true that blockbusters are able to make major box office and rake in crazy amounts of money. But it is also encouraging to see a film like Nobody, which came in second in terms of box office total last week, continue to be a draw for audiences. Now, while it is a major drop-off between number 1 at the box office and number 2 in terms of revenue generated, the film Nobody generated over $3.5 million last week, bringing its domestic total up to $16.5 million, which is essentially what it costs to produce the film. So the fact that it can make back its entire budget in the domestic market and all the profit it makes in the international markets, being pure revenue, has to be very encouraging for films that are made on smaller budgets, and it is strange to refer to the amount of $16 million as a small budget, but that is the film industry. So congrats to Bob Odenkirk and everyone who made Nobody the number 2 movie at the box office last week. In doing so, Nobody did knock the film The Unholy off of the number 2 perch, but that religious horror film still managed to pull in a very respectable $3.1 million, bringing its domestic total up to $7.5 million. And I think the top 3 performing films at the box office have really proved the point of what makes money at the theaters nowadays. A film either needs to be a mega blockbuster packed with mind-bending spectacles, an action film full of a lot of gunfighting that gets the audience's adrenaline flowing, or a movie has to be the ultimate wild cards of the film industry, and that is a horror film. It's hard to know which ones will be successful, but one thing is most definitely certain, and that is there is always going to be an audience that is going to lap up these kinds of films. And while I have mentioned on other episodes of the podcast that April is a relatively light month when it comes to drawing in audiences and producing box office revenue, there is clearly a demand for the type of films that populate the top 3 spots in box office earnings this week. And the film that performed 4th best is a shining example of the other type of film that always performs well at the box office, and those are films geared towards children, with the film Raya and the Last Dragon grossing over $2.6 million, which brings its domestic gross total to nearly $36 million. And I really have to give this movie props, considering it is competing against itself in a sense, with Raya and the Last Dragon being available to people that subscribe to Disney Plus and Premium Access. So, leave it to Disney to make money, even when they are competing against themselves. But we will conclude the box office report with a film I still need to see, and that is the film Voyagers. This sci-fi thriller managed to rake in $1.7 million in its debut week, and this film Voyagers has what I think is a very compelling plot of essentially these elite kids who are serving on the crew of a ship that is on destination to an inhabitable planet where they are essentially going to be charged with reestablishing the human race. And these kids have been bred to be super intelligent as well as super compliant. But a couple of them discover that they have been taking a tonic that essentially suppresses their emotions. So a few of them make the decision to stop taking it each morning, thus getting them into a sort of Pandora's box situation. And of all the films that I've had to talk about on this podcast, I think Voyagers is far and away the most intriguing film and the one I would recommend the most for people to go see and contribute to it making a little bit more at the box office. But that is going to do it for the box office report, and I'm going to transition from one sci-fi thriller to another, and that is going to be the Netflix original Stowaway. And to give a quick synopsis of the film, it is very much like Voyagers in the sense there is a mission to travel through space to another planet in the hopes of colonizing that planet, which in this case is Mars. But as I'm sure most of you who are listening have already guessed based on the title of the film, someone is on the ship that isn't supposed to be there. Somehow, the engineer that was working on the life support system passed out, and no one noticed that he was missing before liftoff, or that this spaceship, where they calculate the weight down to the ounce, was carrying a little extra poundage. But the three main crew members find the engineer on board and pretty much indoctrinate him into the mission. So everything from there on out in the film Stowaway is going to be hunky-dory. Aside from the fact that their life support system is damaged permanently and their projections reveal they only have oxygen to support 3 people while completing the mission. So the characters in this film are faced with making the decision of either sacrificing one of the crew members on board so that the others can live and complete the mission to Mars, which is supposed to be the first step in ultimately colonizing Mars. Or they can all refuse to sacrifice one another and just wait for their oxygen to run out, and they all perish. So the premise of this film is really making me think back to the mandatory philosophy classes I had to take in college, where you are asked a bunch of hypothetical questions about whether or not it is ever morally acceptable to sacrifice a life in order to save multiple lives. The example I always think of is the one where there are miners trapped in a cave-in and you have the opportunity to save 200, but this would require you causing an explosion that would kill 100 people. And if we were to look at these situations as clearly a math problem, the answer is simple. You sacrifice the smaller number for the larger number. But when it comes to dealing with human lives, the answer isn't as simple as just a simple calculus. And with the implications in this film, it's not even 3 lives versus 1. The mission that this whole story is based around is supposed to be the first step in making Mars an inhabitable planet for humans, which is a real-life idea that's being thrown around by people like Elon Musk in order to deal with the population issue that we now face here on Earth. So in this film Stowaway, it's not going to be as simple as sacrificing 1 life in order to save 3 lives. It's really going to be sacrificing 1 life to help ensure that humanity has a prosperous future. So the film Stowaway is going to be very thought-provoking from that aspect, and you're also going to have the audience divided on who they want to survive and making a decision on who they think should be sacrificed. So you will have all this going on in Stowaway set to the backdrop of a ticking clock of when their ship is going to run out of oxygen, all while being in the vast emptiness of space. Which always adds a level of suspense to a film because one false move and everything could go awry, which was seen on display in films like Gravity starring Sandra Bullock and the film Passengers starring Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt. And this Netflix original should continue in the vein of films where a high drama takes place in space. And much like the other films that I've mentioned, this film Stowaway does have a limited cast. So while I'm sure there will be some scenes with incredible special effects because it is a sci-fi movie, this film is largely going to be carried on the performances of the main cast. And like I said earlier, it is going to star Daniel Day Kim, who most people will probably know from his starring role on the show Lost. And in this film, Stowaway, he is going to be making the incredible transformation into David Kim. So, I'm sure he will turn in a terrific performance. I just find it funny that his character's name is so close to his actual name. But anyway, joining Daniel Day-Kim in this film is Anna Kendrick, who I'm sure everyone is familiar with due to her starring role in the Pitch Perfect franchise. And it appears she is changing things up and will be portraying a plucky optimist in this film, which it is always good to see when an actor steps outside of their comfort zone. And for those of you wondering, yes, that is heavy sarcasm. But I am sure she will turn in a good performance, as will Toni Collette, who also stars in the film, who most people will probably recognize from her roles in The Sixth Sense, Little Miss Sunshine, and recently Knives Out. And she will be playing the captain of the mission, so she is going to be playing the main authority figure and the main decision maker in this film. So I'm sure that Collette is going to have to turn in a performance where her character goes through a bunch of conflicting emotions. Which brings us to the fourth and final member of this crew, and that is Shamir Anderson, who plays the titular Stowaway. He is the life support engineer that apparently passed out while working on the ship, and nobody seemed to notice that he was unaccounted for during the launch sequence. Anderson is probably best known for his involvement in the show Winona Earp, where he plays Agent Dawes. And he has been given a tremendous opportunity in this film Stowaway to really show off the range of emotions he can bring to the table as an actor. I mean, the psychological toll it must take on a person of one moment being on Earth, and then the next moment you're hurtling through space on a ship that does not have a U-turn function. Then compound that with all the other challenges the main cast is going to face in this film. But for all of you listening that are interested in checking out the film Stowaway, by the time you're listening to this podcast, it should be available for streaming on Netflix, as it was slated for release starting Thursday, April 22nd. So anyone in the mood for a suspenseful sci-fi thriller, be sure to check out Stowaway. Right now, however, we are going to take a quick break on the GSMC Movie Podcast. But be sure to stick around as we have a lot more to get to. Coming up in our next segment, I'll be giving you the GSMC Movie Podcast News Report, as well as diving into the new Ed Helms film, Together, where Helms plays a middle-aged man who hires a surrogate to carry a child for him, yet ends up falling in love with this surrogate. So that film has a pretty comedic premise and should be fun to talk about. And be sure to stick around till the end of the show, as we have the Oscars coming up, and I will be giving you my picks on who I think are going to be the winners. And once again, to anyone interested in viewing the Academy Awards, they will be taking place on Sunday, April 25th, and you can watch it on ABC. This year's ceremony should prove to be very unique, given that the film industry had to adapt to challenges it had never seen before due to COVID-19, so it will be interesting to see which films come out on top. So stick around, we have all that and more coming up on the GSMC Movie Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Back into the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Rich McDonough, and in my last segment, I just finished talking about the new film Stowaway, which is the new Netflix original sci-fi thriller, where a space mission to Mars accidentally has one more crew member than they anticipated. Not only that, but their life support system is damaged, and they have to decide between sacrificing one crew member so the others can live, or simply waiting until oxygen runs out and they all perish. By the time this episode of the podcast comes out, you should be able to watch it on Netflix, as it is set to be released Thursday, April 22nd. So if you're a fan of sci-fi thrillers, check out Stowaway. But shifting away from a sci-fi thriller from our last segment to a film that will draw in audiences based on its dramatization of a real-life experience. And that is the film Together Together, where Ed Helms stars as a man in his 40s who is ready to have children, so he hires a surrogate. And while that is a real-life occurrence that happens, in this film he ends up falling for that surrogate. So, an incredibly awkward premise, should be a lot of fun to talk about, but first in this segment, I'm going to bring you another installment of the GSMC Movie Podcast News Report, where I dive into news and announcements that have been made around the film industry. And I will start with one of the more bizarre pieces of news relating to the film industry. Apparently, Marvel fans have taken out a billboard in an attempt to get Tony Stark, and by extension, Robert Downey Jr., back in the MCU. And I have to say, I have never seen anything like this, where fans of a character are actively campaigning for that character to be revived. While I do admire their dedication to the character, I really don't see this stunt accomplishing anything, as I'm sure Robert Downey Jr. is done with the character, having portrayed it in 8 different films. But that doesn't mean that Tony Stark is gone forever, because I'm sure, as with most comic book movies, there will be a reboot at some point. So I thought I'd start out with a little bit of a lighthearted story, and sticking within the MCU, it has been revealed that Russell Crowe has been cast to play Zeus in the upcoming film Thor: Love and Thunder. I'm sure it will be fun hearing the explanation as to why they're mixing gods from different mythology, with Zeus, of course, being a Greek god, and Thor deriving his roots from Norse mythology. But I'm sure this film will be a ton of fun, as Taika Waititi is returning as director, and the film is also going to be starring Christian Bale and Melissa McCarthy. And while we are on the subject, why don't we just go for the trifecta of MCU announcements, as the first trailer for Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings was dropped this week. And this is significant because this will be the first MCU film that stars someone of Asian descent in the main role. So score 1 for diversity. But shifting away from the MCU to the other side of superhero films, and I am referring to the DCEU, which recently released Zack Snyder's version of Justice League to HBO Max, and this was expected to boost the number of subscribers to that platform. It unfortunately failed to do so. Now, while this release did increase subscribers a little bit, it fell short of the projections that HBO had for it. But I doubt that HBO is really hurting for subscribers, considering when they announced that they would be simultaneously releasing all of Warner Brothers' films for the year on the streaming platform the same day they are released in theaters. They gained over 4 million subscribers. So, despite the economic conditions we are in, people still think it's worth shelling out the subscription fee for HBO Max each month. But in other news, and a piece of news I found very surprising, is that Pixar is currently holding open casting calls for what will be their first trans character. And I give props to Disney for being forward-thinking and progressive with this move towards fair representation on screen. I just have to say that I was very surprised to hear this piece of news coming from a studio that is normally fairly conservative and doesn't try to ruffle any feathers. And I do wonder what the public reaction is going to be once this project is off the ground and more information comes out about it. But once again, props to Pixar for being so forward-thinking. But that will pretty much do it for the GSMC Movie Podcast News Report, as that seems to be really all there is in terms of late-breaking news in the film industry. So, shifting gears, the film I wanted to talk about in this segment is the new Ed Helms film, Together Together. And this film has a very unique premise. Ed Helms plays someone in his 40s who is ready to have a child, but is single and doesn't really have anybody in his life to embark on that journey with. So he does what is a real life thing. He finds a surrogate that is willing to carry a child for him. That character is played by Patty Harrison, and essentially the plot of this movie is the two of them engage in a contract that will result in a baby. And I know that this is an actual thing that takes place in the real world, but that just sounds like one of the weirdest things that a person can do. And women are entitled to do what they want with their bodies, but renting out your uterus sounds like one of the strangest concepts I have ever heard of. But shedding light on this specific topic is probably in part what the film is trying to accomplish, and give a comedic representation of probably one of the most unique type of relationships there is. And that is the relationship between I guess we will just stick with the term father, and the surrogate that has been co-opted to carry the child for them. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one that is going to draw this comparison, but when I first saw this movie, the first comparison that jumped into my head was the 2006 movie Juno, starring Ellen Page, where she plays a teenager who is pregnant, having to deal with all the emotions and issues that come along with that, in addition to having to go through the adoption process and find a home for an unplanned child. And I feel like the movie Together will shed a lot of light on surrogacy, the way that Juno shed a lot of light on teenage pregnancy. And the comparisons really don't stop with this being a movie about a unique form of pregnancy, but it really has the same feel that Juno did. This, of course, being an independent film, despite having well-known actors in it like Ed Helms and Patty Harrison. This film really seems like it's going to hinge on the performances and portrayals of characters going through incredibly personal and incredibly emotional life events. And I gotta give credit to Ed Helms, who usually plays the goofball in comedic films, but this role seems like he's going to be really challenging himself as an actor. I mean, it can't be easy portraying a man who is so desperate to have a family of his own that he is essentially buying one. So in this role, Ed Helms is really going to tap into a lot of personal emotions of feeling isolated, and for all intents and purposes, being so desperate to the point where his character thinks it would be easier to start a family by hiring a surrogate to carry a child than it would be to find someone to start a relationship with and have a family via traditional methods. So it should be compelling to see how Ed Helms tackles that character. But I think the most compelling role in this film is going to be Patty Harrison, who will be playing the role of a 20-something who is renting out her uterus to grow a child for another human being. That description alone sounds very compelling, and I'm sure that her performance is going to deliver on a lot of emotional beats. Not only is she going to have to accurately portray the emotions that go along with being pregnant, but she's going to have to deal with a possessive, controlling older man who is essentially trying to make sure that she isn't putting herself or the child she is carrying in any sort of danger. So it will be fun to see the dynamic of people of different generations, not just with their approach to pregnancy, but to life as a whole. And while their on-screen relationship will be full of a lot of conflict and differing opinions, Patty Harrison said it was a real pleasure to work with Ed Helms in an interview she did with Variety, and it's just refreshing for me to find people actually talking about films that they are in, as there has been a major vacuum of press junkets surrounding films for obvious reasons, so it's nice to find the actors actually commenting on the films that they're in. But she said that Ed Helms was super polite and great to work with, but she also said it was a bit intimidating just because when she was growing up, Ed Helms was in a ton of projects that she loved. And one can probably imagine she's talking about the Hangover franchise as well as the role he played on The Office. So while on screen, she appears to be constantly at odds with Ed Helms' character, off screen, the two seem to have a very positive working dynamic. So hopefully that will translate to a lot of fun on screen. And with this film coming out, it is going to do a lot to push the boundaries of the traditional romantic comedy. In the same interview to Variety, Harrison stated that this isn't the typical guy meets girl, guy falls for girl type of film that's been done a million times before. It is really going to do a lot to push those preconceived notions and try to redefine the expectations of a love story on screen. And in the film's attempt to redefine what people expect from a romantic comedy, I think a very pivotal step in sending that message is casting Patty Harrison in the first place. For those of you who don't know, she is a transgender actor, and she is just now starting to find mainstream success. So with a film trying to redefine what audiences expect from a romantic comedy, it makes sense to cast an actor in the film that is, in a way, redefining what people are coming to expect when it comes to gender. And many people are calling this a breakout role for Harrison, so for those who are not aware of her, they will know who she is fairly soon. And her starring role in the film Together Together seems to be the latest in a string of successes, as she became the first transgender actor to ever be cast in a Disney film when she was cast in Raya and the Last Dragon. I mentioned earlier in this segment that Pixar is going to be making a film with the first ever transgender character, so if nothing else, Patty Harrison is going to be remembered as an actor that really ushered in a new age of fair representation when it comes to the studios of Disney and Pixar. But like I said, a lot of people are saying this is going to be a breakout performance for her, as she, along with Ed Helms, really formed the emotional center of the film. But assisting them in bringing this film to life, their fellow cast members include Rosalind Chow, who recently starred in the new live adaptation of Mulan, Tim Sharp, who is one of those actors who you'll probably recognize even if you're not really familiar with his work, and is probably best known for his participation in the Judd Apatow project Undeclared, which at this point came out about 20 years ago. But joining them in the cast is old SNL alum Nora Dunn and Tig Notaro, who is probably best known for her work on the show Transparent. So aside from Ed Helms, this cast is really made up of a bunch of, let's call them indie actors, and that formula should really make for a pretty unique film. So for anyone interested in seeing the film Together Together, it will be hitting theaters nationwide starting April 23rd. So by the time this podcast reaches you, you will be able to go and see it. So if you are looking for a film that is a little outside the box and really challenges the modern tropes that are associated with a romantic comedy, be sure to check out Together Together. Right now, however, we are going to take a quick break on the GSMC movie podcast, but don't go anywhere, as in our next segment, I am going to be making my picks for who I think will be taking home awards this Sunday at the Oscars. And like I said earlier in the podcast, this year's ceremony is going to be rather unique. Once again, there will be no one in attendance. But probably the most compelling point about this year's Academy Awards ceremony is the fact that it is going to be judging films that were made during a year of completely unprecedented circumstances, and productions had to overcome challenges that they had never experienced before. And to just give another example of how out of the ordinary this year's ceremony is going to be, this is the first time since 1934 that films from different calendar years are going to be eligible to win at the same ceremony, with last year having to be adjusted because of the pandemic. And off of that, it's not just going to be the unique circumstances that are going to make the 93rd Annual Academy Awards ceremony compelling to watch. This year feels as though it is going to be very competitive across the board, and there are going to be a lot of tough decisions to be made on who is the most deserving performance or contribution to a film that is worth recognition. I know that Mank was an early favorite, considering it garnered 10 Academy Award nominations, but the hype around that film has seemingly subsided, whereas a film like Nomadland has really established itself as a force to be reckoned with in this award season, with that film having won the most total awards to this point. Additionally, this year's Academy Awards has a mix of old faces and newcomers nominated for Oscars, and it will be interesting to see how the members of the Academy of Motion Pictures cast their votes, whether they'll be captivated by a newcomer like Carey Mulligan's performance in A Promising Young Woman, or if they give someone like Glenn Close a quote-unquote career Oscar. All I can say on that subject is there are a lot of deserving nominees this year, and whoever ends up receiving the Oscar will definitely have earned it and will have won in a very competitive year. So be sure to stick around, as we are going to be talking about the Academy Awards from now until the end of the show, and I will be giving you my picks on who I believe will be taking home the hardware. So don't go anywhere. The GSMC Movie Podcast will be right back.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blanks and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Into the fourth and final segment of the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Rich McDonough, and in our last segment, I just finished talking about the new indie film, Together, which stars Ed Helms as a man named Matt, who is ready to have children. Only problem for him, he is not in a relationship and does not have anyone to start a family with. So what is he to do? He does what we would all do in that situation. He contracts a young woman, played by Patty Harrison, to be a surrogate for him. So it is certainly a film with a very unique premise, and should have a little bit of everything in it, with there being moments you laugh at, moments that make you think, and moments that shed light on a topic that not a lot of people are familiar with, and that is surrogacy. So for anyone interested in seeing the film Together, it will be released in theaters starting Friday, April 23rd. So by the time you are listening to this podcast, you will be able to see it. And by the time you are listening to this podcast, the Oscars will be upon us. So, in anticipation for Hollywood's biggest night, I am going to be giving you my picks on who I believe are going to win in each category. For the sake of timing, however, I'm not going to go too far into all the nominees. If you are interested in hearing about those, I suggest you check out the episode of the podcast titled Oscar Nominations and Indie Darlings, where I give a much more detailed account of all the films that were nominated for Academy Awards this year. So without further ado, let's get into selecting who I believe the winners at this year's Academy Awards will be. And I will be starting with the category Best Visual Effects. The winner of this category, I believe, is going to be the one and only Ivan. This is a film starring Bryan Cranston, where he plays as the ringmaster of a circus, and all of the animals in the film are CGI. So I believe for the sheer scale of visual effects that are on display in this movie, plus the amount of work that must go into animating a bunch of characters that are CGI, that the one and only Ivan is going to be taking home this Academy Award. And this film is really just another example of how much of a marvel it is to see how far computer-generated effects have come, to where we are now at the point where animals made out of CGI seem almost lifelike. But once again, my pick to win in this category is the one and only Ivan. Moving on to the next category, which is Best Film Editing, and honestly, I think this is the hardest category to determine a winner in, mostly because this is probably the most subjective of all the categories. Editing is such a meticulous process that really the person editing the film, who can explain why each and every decision moving from scene to scene was made in the first place, and it's really hard to judge how well someone edited a film without really knowing the raw footage that they had to work with. So while I am not very clear on the criteria on which this category is judged on, my pick to win the Academy Award is Nomadland, mostly because the setting of the film did so much to portray emotion and the inner thoughts of Frances McDermott's main character. So once again, I think that Nomadland will win Best Film Editing, and I think this will be the first of many wins it has on the night. So moving right along to the next category, which is Best Costume Design. The winner, I think, in this category is going to be Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And the main reason I think this film is going to win in this category is because I think the Academy loves accuracy when it comes to portraying period pieces, and the very first step in doing that is making sure the wardrobe is accurate to the time period. So while there were many films in this category that represented different periods in American history, I think that Ma Rainey's Black Bottom is going to prevail in the end. And as with Nomadland, I don't think this is the only award that this film is going to win at this ceremony. But moving along to another category that judges the aesthetics in movies, best hair and makeup design, or rather best makeup and hairstyling, I believe the film Mank is going to be taking home this honor. And I do have to say that because this film was shot in black and white, that does contribute to me giving it the nod in this category. Because while you could argue hairstyling between different films in this category, makeup has to do an entirely different job when a film is in black and white. It has to make things appear a lot more sharper, and it provides the actors with a greater level of contrast between them and their surroundings. So the challenge of coordinating makeup in a film that is shot in black and white, coupled with having to make the hairstyles feel authentic to the 1940s, I think that Mank is going to get the nod in this category. And in my first repeat selection of the night, I believe Nomadland is going to be taking home the award for Best Cinematography. The film was shot on location in the American Southwest, so I think because of how they really use the environment, especially when it comes to capturing sunrises and sunsets, the film Nomadland is going to receive recognition for committing incredible visuals to film. So for those keeping score at home, I have Nomadland winning 2 Academy Awards on the evening. But I do have the film Mank pulling even with them atop the leaderboard with a win in the category of Best Production Design. And honestly, with this category, I'm giving it to Mank mostly because I know the Academy Awards really love themselves some films about Hollywood. And with the film Mank providing them a window into yesteryear, with the film being set in the quote-unquote golden age of Hollywood, I think that is just too much for them to resist. And for that reason, I think Mank is going to be taking home an Academy Award for Best Production Design. But moving on to the category of Best Sound, which I honestly think is probably the least competitive of all the categories at this year's ceremony, mainly because I don't think any other film made sound as big a feature of the actual story being told on screen as The Sound of Metal did. For those unfamiliar with the premise of the film, The Sound of Metal is about a drummer who is going deaf. So the way that the sound is edited in this film really gives you an idea of what the character is going through. And the audio aspect of this film does more than any other in the category to actually tell the story. So for those reasons, I have to give it to The Sound of Metal in this category. But moving on to the other audio categories in the Academy Awards, we have Best Original Song. And this one is always tough to pick because this category is very subjective and it's not like a music award show where it's pretty much just based off popularity. Determining a winner for Best Original Song is very subjective. But if I have to pick a winner, I'm going to go with Hear My Voice from the Trial of the Chicago 7. I think out of all the original songs that were turned out, this one has the most powerful message, and I think there is something to be said for the message in this song and how it relates to our current climate. So to reiterate, I believe that the Academy Award for Best Original Song is going to Hear My Voice from the Trial of the Chicago 7. And to continue in the musical categories, I'm going to be picking the film I believe is going to win Best Score. And in this category, I think it's a little bit easier to pick a winner because what really makes a score great is how well it captures the emotion of the film and how well the music corresponds to what's happening on screen. So, while I do think that this category is highly competitive and there were a lot of films that had tremendous scores, I have to give this one to the animated picture Soul, which is rather fitting as score is often called the soul of the cinema. So for those of you keeping score, this is the first win of the night for an animated film. which is a perfect transition into our next category, which is Best Animated Short Film. And for this category, I believe the winner is going to be In Case Anything Happens, I Love You, which is a 2D animated short about two parents that are grieving over the loss of their daughter who was killed in a school shooting. The main reason I believe this short is going to win is because with an animated short, you only have so much time to both tell a story and elicit emotion from an audience. And of all the nominees in this category, I believe this short does the best job of accomplishing both those feats. So while it is a rather tragic story, I have to give the nod to In Case Anything Happens, I Love You. But transitioning to this category's live-action counterpart, Best Live-Action Short, I believe the winner in this category is going to be the film The Present. This short tells the story of a father and daughter trying to buy a wedding anniversary gift in the Israeli-occupied Western Bank of the Palestinian enclaves, and shows the trials and tribulations they have to go through in such a divided region of the world. The Present has already won the BAFTA Award for Best Short Film, and I think it is going to repeat that feat at the Academy Awards for portraying such a powerful and evocative message, which I think is a pretty good transition into our next two categories, which deal with documentary filmmaking. And continuing with the short category, the winner I think that is going to take home the Academy Award for Best Documentary Short Subject is The Hunger Ward, which details the famine that is going on in Yemen at the moment, and how two hospitals are trying to combat the ongoing child malnourishment. And once again, it was very hard to pick a winner in this category because there are a lot of captivating issues that are brought to light in these documentary shorts. But I have to pick a winner, and I'm going with The Hunger Ward. And when it comes to the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature, I am sticking in the realm of healthcare, as I think the winner in this category is going to be The Collective, which is the documentary that tells the story of a widespread conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud in Romania. And with healthcare being such a hot-button issue around the world, it's really eye-opening to see that The Collective uncovered such a crazy story, and for that, I believe they're going to be taking home the Oscar for Best Documentary Feature. Now, The Collective is also nominated for Best International Film, but I believe that honor is going to be taken home by the Danish film Another Round, which stars Mads Mikkelsen and follows his character and a group of friends that reunite for a beer mile. So cheers to Another Round. But that brings us to the Best Animated Feature Film, and I think that Soul is going to take home this award in addition to having already won Best Original Score. Again, I believe this category was fairly competitive, especially because of the very out there animated film, Wolfwalkers. But I think the quality of Soul's animation, in addition to the story it tells, will make it the best animated feature. But moving right along, we are getting into the categories that are considered the major categories, mostly because some variation of these awards have been given since the very inception of the Academy Awards. And I'm going to start with the Best Adapted Screenplay, which I believe is going to be won by Nomadland. I think that of all the films made this year, Nomadland tells the most unique story and gives light to an issue that is very overlooked in our contemporary American society. So for that reason, I think they are going to take home Best Adapted Screenplay, and I do not believe that will be the final award they win on the night. But sticking within the screenplay category, I'm going to move on to Best Original Screenplay. And I think that this category will be won by Aaron Sorkin for his script for the film The Trial of the Chicago 7. Sorkin has already won a Golden Globe for his efforts, and I think he is going to repeat that success at this year's Academy Awards. But now let's get into the acting awards, and I'm going to start with Best Supporting Actress in a Motion Picture, and I think that this award is going to go to Yeon Yu Young for her performance in Minari. She has already won a Screen Actors Guild Award for this performance, as well as a BAFTA Award, and she would become the first Korean woman to win an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. Now, in the male equivalent of this role, Best Supporting Actor, I think it's very clear-cut who the winner is going to be, and that is going to be Daniel Kaluuya. Nothing against anyone else in this category, but Kaluuya delivered a powerhouse performance in Judas and the Black Messiah, and he's pretty much won every single award he's been nominated for the role. So I think it's just going to continue at the Academy Awards this year with him taking home the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Now moving on to Best Leading Actor and Actress in a Motion Picture. I believe that the Best Actress category is one of the most hotly contested of the night, with incredible performances being turned in by the likes of Carey Mulligan, Frances McDermott, Andrea Day, and Vanessa Kirby. But I believe the winner is going to be Viola Davis for her role as Ma Rainey in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And I do believe her co-star in that film, the late Chadwick Boseman, will be awarded a posthumous Oscar for his portrayal of Levi Green. And once again, this was a very competitive category with the likes of Gary Oldman, Anthony Hopkins being nominated as well. But I believe because of the circumstances, as well as Boseman's performance in the film, he will be the winner. And this award will provide a level of closure on a film career that was cut way too short. But as we move on to our last two categories, which are Best Director and Best Picture, I believe that both are going to be won by Nomadland. I believe that Chloe Zhao is going to be rewarded for her efforts as director, and her film is going to walk away with the most Academy Awards, including Best Picture. So there you have it, my picks for this year's Academy Awards. I'll be sure to blast it out in some form on my social media pages. So for all of you that are interested in viewing the Academy Awards, tune in Sunday night, April 25th, to ABC for the 93rd iteration of the Academy Awards. And that will pretty much do it for me here on the GSMC Movie Podcast. Once again, we are brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And I do want to thank all of you that are listening to the podcast. It really means a lot. And if you have not already, subscribe to the show so you're always notified when a new episode is released. Also, if you could write us a nice review, those really help us a lot. And be sure to follow us on our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I've been your host, Rich McDonough, and that will do it for me on this episode of the GSMC Movie Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.